Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushalmehra. My guest today is Sana Hashmi. Sana is a PhD and a postdoctoral fellow at the Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation. She's been working with the foundation since March 2021, and she's an affiliated scholar with the Research Institute of Indo-Pacific Affairs. Her primary research focuses on Taiwan's foreign relations, China's foreign policy, Taiwan's new southbound policy, Taiwan India relations, China's territorial disputes, Indo Pacific and Asian security. Today's podcast is going to be looking at Indo Taiwanese relations. Sana is someone I've been reading for a long time, and it's actually an absolute pleasure to host her. So, Sana, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Namaste, Kushal, and thank you so much for inviting me to the podcast. And I'm very excited to talk about India-Taiwan relations with you.
So, Sarah, if you don't mind me asking, so where did this interest in Taiwan per se, very specifically, come up? Was there a specific reason, or you were like, was it part of your previous research? Like, how did this all start?
So actually, I am a trained sinologist. I did my MPhil and PhD from JNU in Chinese Studies, so from School of International Relations. So I was already studying China. I studied China for over 13 years now. So Taiwan, the interest in Taiwan actually started in 2019, 2020. After I worked with the MEA, I was taking a break to finish my PhD, and then I also started reading more about Taiwan. Because, when you are studying China in India, you only study Taiwan through the lens of India China relationship, through the one China policy, how India used to adhere to it. And then you don't really read, you don't really study Taiwan per se when you are studying in India. And that's not just India specific, that used to be in a lot of countries. But now, of course, recently that has changed. But at that point of time, there was not a lot of interest on Taiwan. And one reason was also because India China relationship was also at least all right, manageable. So a lot of scholars, Indian scholars, were scared of focusing too much on Taiwan. If we study Taiwan, we won't be able to go to China. So this used to be the narrative that was at least before 2020. That has definitely changed now. But then I came to Taiwan in February 2020 on a Ministry of Foreign Affairs fellowship, and I was just supposed to be here for 11 months. But halfway through my fellowship, I realized there's so much potential in India Taiwan relationship. I realized that how people in India do not know about Taiwan, and it was also the time when COVID-19 was happening. But when every other country was under lockdown, I was so impressed by how Taiwanese government was able to kind of limit the COVID-19 pandemic, the impact of it, and how we were living a normal life. So I actually realized that it was important for me to tell my fellow Indians that how Taiwan is managing this capability, and we really need to know about this country we have no idea about. And I started using my social media. I still remember how I made this thread in mid 2020, and it got a lot of interest from Indians, and I got a lot of likes, and I realized that how people want to know about Taiwan. So then I realized that perhaps I there is much more to Taiwan India relationship, and this is one of the reasons why I'm still in Taiwan and I'm studying India Taiwan relationship. I'm trying to promote India Taiwan relationship. So this is the gist of how my interest in Taiwan began.
You know what the funny thing is? I clearly remember first year of COVID, and Taiwan was one of the early responders in the sense that they knew when to shut down, they knew what to take seriously and what not to take seriously. And I clearly, distinctly remember somebody at that time telling me uh, that you want to understand China or what China is saying or doing, look at how Taiwan responds, because nobody gets the Chinese better than the Taiwanese do. And I was like, wonder why.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point, and this is just not about pandemic. This is about a lot of things. There's a thing that if you cannot really go to China anymore, China is not open to talking, and this is just not about the government. This is also true for the scholars as well. So this is a very common thing that they say about China and Taiwan, that if you want to understand China, you should go to Taiwan. You should talk to Taiwanese. But you're so right about it. As in, no one really took what Taiwan was saying seriously at that point of time. It was actually the Taiwanese administration that wrote to WHO, but then, of course, Taiwan is not a part of the process, and then they didn't listen to Taiwan. But I think the good thing was that Taiwan at least started taking steps for its own population. So, in fact, Taiwan never had to go through the proper hard lockdown. It was just a soft lockdown that was only for a few months. And the life was pretty much normal. And it was normal to such an extent that people who were in Taiwan, we were very guilty of living a normal life because we were seeing what was happening in the rest of the world. But I think, as an Indian who has been living in Taiwan for 4 years, who spent these years, the COVID-19 years in Taiwan, I'm very thankful to the government for keeping me safe and for keeping whoever was in Taiwan safe.
Yeah, I clearly remember that. And I think the way Taiwan handled the entire COVID pandemic was very interesting, very novel, um, and just just fascinating to see certain countries. But today, when I reached out to you, and I was like, I wanted to do a India Taiwan, and I'll share why I decided to cover. I've been following your work, and I really admire your work. I've been reading wherever you write. I try to download as many things as I can. I try to be as up to date as possible. I have like a few people I go to, and I try to read them. It's very hard to follow one think tank. Rather than following a think tank, my model of understanding subjects is I pick individual journalists, individual writers, individual authors, and I try to follow them. And then through that, I try to weave a narrative in my own brain, and then through that I try to bring it to my podcast. Now, when we talk about India Taiwanese relations, it's obvious that we're going to have to talk about China. So it's like a big dinosaur in the room, not an elephant in the room, that we cannot ignore. But let's start here.
Hmm.
Maybe we can do a Taiwan 101 for people who may not know. I'm going with the working assumption that there are some people who are going to come over here. Now, there might be some who work in, semiconductor industries and stuff like that, and they must be very much interested in what Taiwan is doing, because nowadays Taiwan is only known for semiconductors. It's like a war of semiconductors where Taiwan is like the hot potato, and everybody is like, "Oh, I want Taiwan semiconductors."
It's
That
more
kind
like
of
Swamber of Taiwan, I would say.
That's so true. That's so true. That's a perfect word, the swiper of Taiwan. But let's start with the Taiwan 101, a little bit about the society, where they come from. I don't expect you to go to the 1600s, how the Dutch showed interest in them, and then how through the Dutch everyone. No, I'm talking about last 100 years. So maybe we can start there with what's the breakdown of the society, like what's the Filipino angle, what's the Chinese angle, Aborigine angle, all of that. Maybe we can start there.
Thank you so much for your kind words, and I'm really happy to hear that you follow and you read my work. And I think it's a very good approach that you follow individual and not institutions. So that's what this is one of the way of keeping yourself apprised of what's actually, having a neutral perspective. So I really appreciate your approach. So yeah, let's talk about Taiwan. And then I would first talk about the contemporary Taiwan, what Taiwan is right now. As in, I feel that Taiwan has gone through a lot of changes. And specifically in the past 4 or 5 years, since the beginning of the pandemic, I would say since the coming of DPP in power that came in 2016. But more recently, since the start of the pandemic, Taiwan has changed completely. Taiwan is a very modern liberal society. It's the first Asian country to allow same sex marriage. And I am seeing firsthand how safe Taiwan is. And there is no judgment within the society. Of course, in Asian society, I'm not saying there's no judgment. When there are Asians, there is definitely judgment. But despite all these, Taiwan being an Asian society, there is still a lot of element of modernity. You would realize that how modern Taiwan is, how liberal people are, and how safe Taiwan is. But let me talk about how Taiwanese are changing, how Taiwanese identity is changing. And you talked about China, the elephant in the room, the dinosaur, whatever we want to call China. Uh, Specifically after what happened in Hong Kong in 2014, and how there were a pro democracy and anti, I would say, CCP protests that were happening, that was a wake up call for a lot of Taiwanese. because the entire system was that, if at all Taiwan is going to be reunited with the mainland China, that would be on the basis of Hong Kong, a one country two system. But then eventually people in Taiwan started realizing that, this is not feasible, because how Taiwan has been able to earn the democracy, its hard earned freedom, they really do not want to lose. So what has uh, happened in the past couple of years, that more and more people in Taiwan, they have started identifying themselves as just Taiwanese, and there is just a small percentage of people who identify themselves as both Chinese and Taiwanese. So I think this is a very, very major concern for China, because the thing is, if people in Taiwan do not really want to be unified with the mainland China and with the CCP, they cannot do it with the people agreeing to it. Now they can only do it with the use of force. Now this entire idea that, people in Taiwan want to be reunited with the mainland China, so that's not going to happen anytime soon now. So I think this is one of the major concerns of the people of the CCP leadership. And I feel that this is the how Taiwanese government handled the COVID-19 pandemic, and how it prompted a lot of countries to talk about Taiwan. As in Taiwan, before the pandemic and before DPP came to power, I would actually say the DPP leadership was actually able to put Taiwan on the global map, because before that, a lot of people used to think that Taiwan is a part of China, or Taiwan is just Thailand. So I think this has changed. A lot of people are better aware about what Taiwan is. So I would definitely give credit to the DPP leadership for that. So definitely now I'm also seeing how people in Taiwan are changing. So as I said, that they're identifying themselves as more Taiwanese than Chinese, and now we also have elections um, next month, in exactly a month. January 13th is the date. So this is a very exciting time in Taiwan. But before that, before DPP, there was KMT in power, and I think globally, or at least at a larger scale, KMT is considered or seen as a party that is pro China. But I won't really, it's not black and white, and I won't really say that it's that they want to be kind of just reunited with mainland China. It's much more uh, complicated than that. But within the KMT, I feel specifically if we talk about foreign policy, it's not the same, because that focus is definitely on stabilizing, or now if they come back to power, it would more be on restabilizing relationship with China. So definitely this is one factor that is going to be watched by countries all over, because now specifically we are seeing how a lot of countries in the world are looking at China. They're also trying to manage their relationship with China while safeguarding their own interest. So this is something that Taiwan is kind of also dealing. So this is one of the reasons why a lot of countries are actually watching the election result and hoping that uh, whoever wins, they should deal with China carefully, because Taiwan is very important for a lot of countries, and it's just not about Taiwan, a tiny island which is not as big as China, because a lot of countries prefer China over Taiwan, because the size, you do not have diplomatic relationship with Taiwan. But the thing is, it is strategically and economically a very, very important country. So Taiwan under China is not beneficial for any country in the world, including India. So this is one of the things that a lot of countries are concerned about. But then, if you have any specific question on history, I would answer that.
So I want to focus on the elections first, and then I can take it back, because I mean, if I remember correctly, it's only after the 90s that they really started having elections, because otherwise there was like this long period of military rule in Taiwan, pretty much from the 50s onwards, right? They just had military rule going there, and whatever you want to call it, what was that, KMT or something, that they were kicked out. I mean, I don't remember.
Ending law, and then Taiwan became
Yeah,
democratic. Before
yeah.
that, Taiwan was largely an authoritarian now state.
Yeah, it was an authoritarian state. And then also, I mean, from what I've understood, like there's a period of Japanese colonialism, and then some folks like are very I'm not saying pro Japanese colonialist attitudes, but they kind of have saw the good parts in the Japanese colonial times. And then when the Chinese authoritarianism took over for that period, they really had that problem. And then what is that famous day 228 or whatever it's called in Taiwanese history? That thing has happened. So all of that is there. But it's a very interesting thing. I read this piece on the conversation where the author has written, this was written, I think, a few days back, on the conversation. I forgot the name of the author, Richie B. Yeah, it's written on 11th of December, just a couple of days ago. So uh, for the record, their first presidential elections were held, I think, in 1996. And after 1996, we are here. So now it's a very interesting line. I want to ask your opinion on this. So I'm directly reading a quote. In a recent visit, one representative told me there are actually four parties in the January 13th election: the Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, the Kuomintang, the KMT, Taiwan's People Party, TPP, and China. So it's very interesting how that line is written, because now the usual thing is, like you correctly said, that oftentimes KMT is kind of called, I don't know what word, like slightly sympathetic to the Chinese influence at times, while I would
Mm.
say the other political party, TPP, is more about, oh, there is rising inflation, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that right, and they constantly tussle on that basis. Now, when this author has written this article, why do you think that author is like China is the fourth player? There are four political outfits here.
So first, I'll say something about what you said. It's a very interesting point about the colonialism, because when as Indians we talk about colonialism, we are very bitter about it, and rightly so. But I would say that in Taiwan, it's very different. There has been positive impact of Japanese colonialism on Taiwan, and if you talk about how Taiwanese see Japanese, it's very positive. And then it's, I think, one of the most preferred destinations for tourism for Taiwanese. And if you ask any Taiwanese, what do you think of Japan? They love Japan. There is so much and such authentic Japanese food all over, and of course because of colonialism. But then they just, and even today they have maintained it primarily because there is this affinity towards Japan. That is the point that I feel that Indian audience should know about that. And but I feel that even Japan is such an important country for India as well. And even if you look at now, when Taiwan is a flashpoint in the Indo-Pacific, and of course US and Taiwan relationship is very different, very unique. But I think Japan is one country that is actually taking the China threat very seriously. And Japan is one country that actually kind of uh, brought India into the Indo Pacific, the 2007 Abe speech in the parliament, and then the subsequent initiative that have been taken by Japan. I think there is so much similarity between how Japan has been viewing India and how Japan has been trying to make Taiwan mainstream. So I think that is a very important point that I wanted to mention. But now coming to the elections and the point that you mentioned about China, the fourth party. Um, I would say that it's actually because TPP is a relatively new party, and this is the very first time that they are actually contesting for the presidential election. So Taiwanese election is very interesting, and in a country like India, election season is actually like festival. It's the largest democracy in the world, um, and then it's remarkable how India actually handles election and so efficiently. But with that, there comes a lot of drama. And in Taiwan as well, it's nothing less than drama. Like what they really want. So I'll just give you an example. I'm pretty sure that Indian audience didn't really see it. So now the KMT and TPP candidate, they both tried to form a coalition against the DPP presidential candidate. And they said that they're going to do it, but they're going to negotiate that who's going to be contesting for the president, who's going to be the running mate. And they couldn't really reach a consensus. And then they also televised this entire fiasco, and that really impacted public perception here. And then there was another potential presidential candidate, Terrico, who was the founder of Foxconn, and he Also, there was a lot of drama involving him. It was televised, and then in the end, it couldn't really work out. And he also kind of didn't really, the Foxconn co-founder, he didn't really go ahead with it. But about China, it's a known fact that how China, whenever there is the election in Taiwan, uh, how China has been trying to interfere in Taiwanese election, and specifically the DPP has been in power since 2016. And as soon as DPP came to power in 2016, one of the first things they did was to say that, we are now going to accept the 1992 consensus, and we are not going to use Chinese Taipei in for participation in international institutions. So what China started doing is to start shrinking Taiwan's international space, and this is one of the reasons why Taiwan wasn't even accepted in any of the discussions in any meetings when the COVID-19 pandemic was happening, despite G7 countries issuing statement and a lot of countries showing support for Taiwan, because it isn't about geopolitics. It is about the welfare of the 23 million people of Taiwan. And it's just not about Taiwan and Taiwanese. I would say it's much more than that. There was SARS in 2003 when China, Hong Kong, Taiwan suffered. So, when pandemic started, there was this notion that it cannot really reach a country like India. It cannot go to the US because these diseases are primarily, it happens in East Asia, it happens in Southeast Asia. So it actually happened before, and they had experience to deal with it. And I think this is one of the major reasons how Taiwan took SARS seriously. So there was mechanism in place. And it's a very serious country, as in I would say there's a lot of accountability in Taiwan. So this is one of the reasons why they were able to handle COVID-19 so well. So, it is very important for countries such as India and, you name it, Japan, US, to learn from Taiwan's best practices, to share experiences. So because of China, Taiwan is also not able to do that. So I think this, and also this is our loss as well. So coming back to China, so in the election, now we would see a lot of articles saying that China is actually the fourth party, because China will definitely try to interfere in the elections, because what they want is KMT to come back to power. Because when DPP is in power, they are more focused on expanding Taiwan's international space. They're more focused on advancing its external outreach. And I just said that DPP and President Tsai Ing-wen was able to place Taiwan on a global map. So it is also leading to internationalization of the Taiwanese issue. This is not in the interest of China. So what China wants is to isolate Taiwan. What China wants is to countries to not send representatives to Taiwan, to not send parliamentarians to Taiwan. So this is something that China has been trying to stop countries to do. So if DPP comes to power, and specifically William Lai, who is the vice president right now and who is the presidential candidate, so he is from a faction in DPP, and he was before he assumed his position. And even then, when he was vice president, he talked about how he was pro Taiwan independence. But now, of course, he's mellowed down, and he has said that he believes in status quo, and he would do whatever is good for Taiwan and the people of Taiwan. So if he comes to power, and DPP comes back to power, this is not in the interest of China. So there is a lot of uncertainty about what is going to happen to the cross-strait relationship. So what China wants is to KMT come back to power, so that uh, they start focusing on China. And there is, according to the CCP leadership, perhaps there might be some scope of for peaceful reunification with the Chinese motherland. So this is one of the reasons why the CCP leadership has been interfering in the Taiwanese elections. And I feel that in the next this month, we are going to see more of what China does with in the elections. But I don't see that, no matter whatever they do, and we can talk about it later, but I do not think that it is going to really impact how the voters vote. Because the thing is, they're also very used to such tactics from the Chinese side. They have seen that if this is coming, of course, this is a major concern for the administration right now, but I don't think that it is going to impact how people vote in the elections.
Yeah, as far as what I have understood by following the polls, they have like a proportional representation system, right? The Taiwanese, from what I have understood, they have a proportional representation system. And in the polls, I still feel the DPP representative William Lai, or whatever his original name is, some Laich. I can't, I don't want to butcher the man's name, so I give up. But yeah, so that's a very important point you spoke about, the Japanese equation with the Taiwanese, because most people would think that they would hate them, but they actually like them, and it's one of the reasons why the Chinese, when they did take over and were influencing Taiwan for a major time, they would have those bad periods, and that led to those revolts in Taiwan and those street protests in Taiwan, lives being lost, and all those things happening. At the end of the day, all leading to democracy. Is, in fact, isn't the image in the CCP like all these people are pro Japan, they are sellouts? That's what they call them, right? Sellouts, because they're pro Japan and they like the colonialism of Japan.
For the CCP leadership, anyone who's not aligning with the interest of the CCP is a sellout. So even India
Yeah,
is a sellout of the,
yeah,
to the US. So,
yeah. But I actually wanted to showcase that, because I will never forget this. Two things I'll never forget: how the Chinese function. One was that John Cena speaking in Mandarin and apologizing to the people of China. I don't want to show that video, but the most appalling thing that I could come across was the the senior WHO official. I don't know how many people remember this. I want to play this clip for.
yeah.
Oh my god, this was such a shocker.
WHO considered Taiwan's membership.
Look at this. Look at this.
Hello? With the
Sorry, I can't hear. I couldn't hear your question.
okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question.
No,
So-
that's okay. Let's move to another one then.
That's it. I mean, if there ever was the worst wiggling out experience on in the history of the human race, I mean, that was insane. I don't want to play the John Cena clip, because that is just
That was
that was
bizarre.
just weird. That was bizarre. John Cena apologizing for acknowledging Taiwan, but now this entire thing, right? Okay, I was looking at polls again, so it's quite clear that in the recent poll, I think DPP's popularity is like up 1.7%. And as you have correctly said, that because the KMT and the TPP basically could not come up with a coalition idea, so now the vote trifurcates, and the chances of DPP winning has basically increased. But now that everybody now has a baseline understanding of Taiwan, now let's get into the Indian Taiwan relationship. So, if I was to ask you, what are like the top five uh, issues on the table as far as India and Taiwan are concerned?
From the government side, right?
Yeah,
Uh, Definitely. I think Indian government approach is primarily to focus on and advancing areas of cooperation that have been existing within the mandate of this unofficial relationship, because India Taiwan do not really have diplomatic relationship. But with the establishment of the representative offices that are de facto embassies since 1995, we are seeing that. I feel that India's policy definitely has been evolving, but has been significantly evolved since 2020. We can talk about it later, but to answer your question, definitely economics. The first is to get more investment from Taiwan in a number of sectors, not just in the field of semiconductor, but there are a number of areas where India is looking to attract investment from Taiwan. Then, second is trade is increasing, and for the very first time in the history of India Taiwan relationship, the trade actually crossed the 10 billion mark. Of course, when you compare it, India's trade with other countries is not as much, but I would say that it's still not as bad, and there is definitely progress. Then third is to strengthen cultural relationship, more awareness. Then I would say there is an effort to is strengthen people to people ties. uh, it's a part of generating more awareness, making people more awareness, perhaps through tourism, through connectivity. And the last point, I would say that there is also an effort to strengthen educational ties and institutional linkages between India and Taiwan. And all these areas are very much a part of the unofficial relationship. This is not nothing new, as in this has been happening since 1995. But I would say that what I'm seeing in the past couple of years, that there is more effort from both the sides to strengthen the existing areas of cooperation. And I also believe that if there is more cooperation, if there is more awareness, if there is more willingness to strengthen ties in the areas that have been agreed upon, there would be more advancement in other areas of cooperation that are not within the mandate, such as political ties, such as security ties. So right now, India is very cautious about having any security cooperation talks. And I think it's very natural also. It's very logical when India doesn't have diplomatic ties, when India has a active boundary dispute with China, and China is just next door. And also we just don't have China. We also have China plus Pakistan nexus. And now with this Russia-Ukraine war, we also have this another component that has been added to the already complex India-China relationship, and also how India has to safeguard its own relationship with Russia. So there are multiple complicated factors that India really has to consider before it kind of strengthen its outreach in the Indo-Pacific region, and particularly with Taiwan.
Yeah, as far as India is concerned now, see, the Indian government, as far as from what I understand, you can correct me, I'm wrong. India has been very, careful and cautious when it comes to um, the one China policy. Indian government does not go out of its way and antagonize China in any way possible in this particular issue. On the one China policy issue, it was also very interesting to bring in. Obviously, you have to bring in the United States of America over here too. Even the American state policy, while it says that, oh, we will stand up for Taiwan or we will defend Taiwan if push came to shove, like President Biden was very categorical. It was quite interesting that he called Xi Jinping a dictator, and the government official, American government official, was like, "What am I going to do with this guy?" That expression was kind of priceless.
Yeah, no, let me talk about one China policy first. As in, you rightly mentioned that India used to adhere to one China policy, and India was very strict about one China policy. But that has changed. And I feel that India's policy towards China and one China policy has totally transformed in the past, I would say, 5 to 7 years. But let's talk about one China policy first. So India stopped mentioning one China policy in the joint statements from, I think it was 2008 that India mentioned it last time. But even when India was adhering to the one China policy, India was accepting the Tibet Autonomous Region and Xinjiang as parts of China. But India never mentioned about Taiwan. And that's a very specific point about Taiwan, because the thing is and I think it's a very common misunderstanding that when India is adhering to one China policy, that actually means that India is also accepting Taiwan as a part of China. But since 1949, since the PRC was established and then the ROC government came to Taiwan, India has never ever mentioned Taiwan in any of the joint statement. As in, we don't know what happened behind the closed doors and what India told the Chinese side how they perceive Taiwan, but officially, publicly, India never mentioned Taiwan as a part of China. But since 2010, India has never mentioned in any of the joint statements, in any of the official documents. And in 2014, when then foreign minister of India, Sushma Swaraj, late Sushma Swaraj, she was there. She actually told the Chinese foreign minister that if you cannot accept one India policy, please do not expect us to still follow the one China policy. And of course, we know the answer of it. Chinese side never accepted the one India policy. And then Doklam happened, and then India's policy began to change since Doklam. And then the Chinese side realized that India is actually moving closer to the US, because after that, the quadrilateral dialogue was revived. So then we saw that China extended an olive branch to India, and then we saw two informal summits that happened in Wuhan as well as in Mamallapuram. But then Galwan happened, and I think that was the final nail in the coffin. There was this realization, there was always this realization that, this isn't about territory. The dispute isn't about territory. The dispute is not about differing perception of the line of actual control. China is not resolving the dispute with India because it wants to keep it alive. It wants to use it as a pressure tactic. And this is what is happening because China actually resolved its boundary disputes with 12 of its neighbor, barring India and Taiwan. India and Bhutan. So why not these two countries? So I think there was this public acknowledgement after Galwan clashes. And apart from that, there is also public acknowledgement of China being a fundamental threat to India's security. We recently saw how I think Defense Minister Rajnath Singh categorically saying that China is a threat to India. And I would also say that this isn't happening because, US wants us to do that. We are doing it because we feel that this is something that we need to address right now. And we cannot go ahead with doing business with China if China is actually threatening our territorial sovereignty, integrity. So I do feel that this is our India's China policy is very independent of what the other countries have been doing. And so Taiwan, to just put it simply, that India doesn't really agree to adhere to one China policy anymore, and Taiwan was never a part of India's acceptance of one China policy. But recently, I would say that the relationship with Taiwan is also changing. With this change in approach towards China, there's also this realization that we do not really have to take care of China's red line anymore. So we have been kind of ignoring our relationship with Taiwan just because, we have to respect China's red lines. But at the same time, China isn't really respecting our red lines. China has been assisting Pakistan since the 1950s, 1960s, and it's primarily because they want to contain India. It's all aimed at India. This China-Pakistan nexus is not because they are actually iron brothers. This is primarily because and aimed at India. So I do feel that this is something that and also, over the years, in the last decade, we have seen how India was the first country to oppose the Belt and Road Initiative, and it was primarily because of the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So I feel that the public acknowledgement has been very important for India to also realize that it is important and it's mutually beneficial to reach out to Taiwan. And there was definitely an outreach from Taiwan. So I would say that India has started taking that outreach seriously now. So yeah, what was your other question? I think I've been talking about.
No, I want to break down the trade thing, which was like the one surprising thing that I found was that chemicals kind of made up of almost 23% of Indian imports from Taiwan in 22. And when I started looking up, I thought Taiwan electronic parts, like high-end electronics, semiconductors and stuff like that. But no, to my utter shock, last year we imported more chemicals than electronic parts from China. Like electronic parts made like 17.5% of our imports, and chemicals made actually a good 23% chunk, which is basic, which shows that Taiwan, as far as we are concerned, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, from an Indian perspective, is Taiwan the one shop that can provide us high level technological support, which we desperately need? It's not like we have all the answers, right? The first step towards being a powerful nation is to not lie to oneself and know where your strengths lie and where your weaknesses lie and where you could learn. Like I always give the cricketing analogy, right? When India started becoming how did India become a cricketing superpower? They started setting up institutes of excellence in their own country, calling people from other countries who were trained in that, coming in their country, training their people. And today we are in a situation where we have good coaches, good trainers, good physiotherapists, etc., etc., etc. But it were all these people, somebody used to come from Australia, somebody used to come from England, and from all these countries, and they still benefit from us. It's not like we use them and then we threw them away. They still have an active economic working relationship with India. Like you have Aussie coaches in the MRF Cricket Fast Bowling Academy in Chennai, just as an example. So I guess from an Indian perspective, is that what India needs from Taiwan, like these kind of specific inputs?
There's a lot of scope, and definitely India is realizing that it's important to reach out. But also, when we talk about Taiwan, Taiwan has trade surplus, and of course, if you compare it with surplus with the trade deficit with China, it's of course it's just there's no comparison. But definitely there is a lot of interest in getting investment. First, I would say trade is, I would say that it's not a primary focus area. And when we talk about investment, it's just not about semiconductor. And I feel there's also a sustained interest, sustained focus on getting away from semiconductors. You mentioned in the beginning that everyone is looking at Taiwan. 90% of the advanced chips are manufactured in Taiwan. That specifies how important Taiwan is for the world, is for manufacturing. Like everything needs chips. So I do feel that the focus, of course, India definitely, now that India is developing its own semiconductor ecosystem, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea are the countries where India has been looking at. It's just not Taiwan, there are other countries as well. And, it's just a very recent initiative, so it is going to take time. But India has been trying to get investment in the field of semiconductor. But apart from that, there are several other fields where India has been looking at Taiwan. And there are active talks. In fact, the only government to government interaction that India and Taiwan has is in the economic field. So we just concluded this economic consultation industrial collaboration summit that happened, and it's at from Taiwanese side, it's deputy minister, and from India side, it's the secretary, DPIIT. So the other sectors that India has been looking at is EV. And in fact, today only I read this news that Gogoro will be manufacturing made in India. So Gogoro is a company that, so everyone in Taiwan, I think most people use scooters here, but they are electrical scooters. And then the most unique thing about that is the battery swapping system. So I know that it will be very challenging to kind of have this similar kind of battery swapping system, but they're trying and they're very hopeful about that. And even if you look at Foxconn, very recently when we had, I think, Semicon India, and Prime Minister Modi was sitting on this stage, and there was Foxconn chairman who was also speaking, and he actually said that Prime Minister Modi told me that IT is equal to India-Taiwan. And I looked at the body language of Prime Minister Modi. He was actually nodding to that. So, this is actually coming from the highest level in India. And then Prime Minister Modi doesn't need to talk about Taiwan, but we know that he has had prior exposure to Taiwan. He knows about what could we get from Taiwan, because when he was the chief minister, the largest ever economic delegation from Taiwan visited India in 2011, sorry. And in 1999, Prime Minister Modi actually visited Taiwan when he was the general secretary of BJP. So I think he's one of those rare former chief ministers who actually looked at Taiwan for his state as well. So I think this is something that when he's the prime minister, he's looking to attract from Taiwan. So this is actually, when we talk about strengthening economic relationship with Taiwan, this is just not coming from the state government. Of course, state governments are also reaching out to Taiwan. We get a lot of state government delegations. We get a lot of DPIIT delegation from Taiwan. But I think what is underappreciated and what we really don't talk about, that the green signal to strengthen economic relationship with Taiwan is coming from the highest level. So there are policies, there are initiatives that the government is taking towards Taiwan. But I feel that we also need to get away from this overhyped, over-discussed semiconductor area. Because, of course, if it happens, it is going to transform the nature of the relationship. If, for example, TSMC comes to Taiwan, invest in Taiwan, and all these obstacles that we keep seeing, that, we sign an MOU and tomorrow we see that it just falls apart. So there are structural issues. We need to address those issues. But for example, if TSMC comes to India tomorrow, it's definitely going to transform the nature of the relationship. We have more investment from Taiwan. We have more stakes. We have more interest in Taiwan. Then I think it will be important and it will become imperative for the leadership to talk about Taiwan at the political level. Right now, we do not really have those kind of interest in Taiwan that we could talk about it at the political level, and we kind of get ourselves into a situation where it would become difficult for us to manage. So I do feel that there is a lot of potential, and the government really wants to reach out to Taiwan. So Taiwan needs to see how it could actually read those signals and strengthen economic ties to such an extent that it becomes a very, very important component of India-Taiwan relationship.
Now, you raised a very important point. As of now, we don't have any official formal relationship, as in the Republic of India and if we were to say the Republic of Taiwan, right? We don't have formal relationships, country to country level relationships. Now, one way to circumvent it is, like you rightfully said, theek hai, MEA is not doing whatever it is, but let's say Chief Minister of Maharashtra, where I
Mhm.
am from, he can always go to Taiwan as a
Mhm.
chief minister of a country, visiting there. Hey, why don't you bring some investment to my state? Now,
Mhm.
but how long are we going to do this? You know, quite obvious state to state level relationship, but it's not obvious. I mean, it's such a, I don't know how to say. It's like an absurd sort of a relationship that we have, where everybody knows we want to have a direct relationship, but nahi wo bura maan jayenge kind of a thing. And I mean, and we don't even want to say who the wo is in that line. Wo bura मान जाएंगे कौन है वो पता नहीं वो Voldemort है, the one who shall not be named. And I mean, why can't we just do it directly? Is something that it's bugged me, because we clearly have more shared values with Taiwan at a people to people level.
No, absolutely. As in, I'm with you on this, and um, as in, to be devil's advocate, I would say that India's policy is changing, but it's very slow. And the thing that you said, ki wo bura maan jayenge, this is something that we do not really want to uh, destabilize our relationship further with China. And then I feel I don't think that they're even allowing chief ministers to come. And then I'm not sure if the chief ministers are showing interest, because I haven't really heard anything like that yet. But we do receive in Taiwan delegations from the state government sometimes, and then I keep seeing in the local media that in Taiwan there's a state delegation visit. But of course, it's at the official level, it's not at the political level. So any political visit would mean that India is advancing, is trying to provoke China, whatever. But forget about chief ministers. Why can't they send parliamentarians, a bipartisan delegation? And there is actually India-Taiwan Parliamentary Friendship Association that was established in 2016 and then revived in 2020. So the only parliamentarian that we have received in Taiwan in the past 7 years is uh, Honorable Minister Sujit Kumar, who's from BJD. And when he was here, I met him here. So he is very pro India Taiwan relationship. He is really doing a lot of work. But I feel that when I look around and when we look at our member of parliamentarians, I just realize that it's just him. No one else is talking about it. And perhaps, this is how Indian politics is. I don't see a lot of MPs talking about foreign relations. So I don't know if I could blame the MEA for not sending them here, or should I just blame these MPs who are not taking interest in foreign policy? And when we talk about India, being a wish guru, you cannot be a wish guru without your member of parliamentarians taking part in foreign policy issues and taking a bipartisan visit. So yeah, that's an issue that I've been talking about online, offline, but I haven't really got an answer yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things that bugs me all the time. I have never understood this policy of playing footsie with when it comes to these things. Like it's kind of a bad relationship where we are. It almost sounds as if we are having an affair with Taiwan while we are married to China. It literally comes off like that. That's what I look at it as.
Yeah, yeah, I haven't thought about it like that, but yeah, they could be more
No,
open
no, the
about.
whole world, and not just us. The whole world is having an affair with Taiwan while they are all married to China. Everybody, including the Americans.
But they're
It's
also looking for divorce, so with China. So I don't know
yeah,
what is.
and it's
No, I
so
think
funny. Everybody goes and tells Taiwan. So, Taiwan constantly goes like, "When are you gonna marry me? You've been dating me for all this while." They're like, "Don't worry, I will marry you." That's what's happening.
that's that's such an appropriate example. This is how they
It just
behave.
bugs. Yeah, it's annoying to me, as and I'm not even foreign policy guy. I just follow the news. I maybe read people like you, and I just look at all of this and I'm saying, this person made this statement, this person made this statement, this person made this statement.
I'm like, yaar, seedha bolna. It's just absurd, but that's how foreign policy is. But I want to focus on one more thing. There was this, news that was broken. I think it was in November, where there was some sort of India-China labor supply pact, and there was a lot of, yeah, it's like India-Taiwan, sorry, like they needed 100,000 people to work, and I guess Taiwan also. China is an aging society. Everybody knows. Nobody knows what their official age is. I don't trust any detailed research coming out of China. I'm sorry. It's just a fact of life. I don't trust any of the numbers that come out of there. And the Taiwanese also wanted Indian laborers, because usually, I think historically they had different supply chains. Now they were like, we want Indians, and then there was something like, oh no, then they said no because we think Indians are dirty or something. All kinds of internet things have been spread. So can we talk about that whole story now, and where do we stand?
No, it became a sensational and very controversial issue online. But yeah, I think let me shed some light on it. So yeah, of course, there was news that India and Taiwan are going to sign a labor pact, and I think it came after the news uh, after India and Israel were also supposed to sign similar agreement. But I think it was there are a number of points when we talk about this. The first is the negotiations were, and I think still going on. The number was never agreed upon. And I feel that even with India, Israel, there was no number that was agreed upon that, you sign. And then how could you even write in an agreement that, India is going to send 100,000 people? So I think that was a part of the misinformation campaign. We still don't know the source for Israel, but for Taiwan, we know that there were a lot of pro-China outlets and pro-China online groups that started disseminating that wrong information. And I think it started with Bloomberg, and this is something that I have been saying, that you are talking about all these Chinese accounts, you're talking about, and it became such an issue that on the Indian Twitter or whatever, everyone just started talking about it, and everyone started getting angry. And as an Indian who has been living here, I was also a little disheartened, and I also tweeted about it. But then Bloomberg, first of all, I think we really need to say it aloud that it was Bloomberg who spread the misinformation, because the report came from Bloomberg. So I feel that it was very irresponsible of Bloomberg to do that, because it did kind of uh, create an issue that was so unnecessary. Because I have been living in Taiwan, and I don't really see, and I haven't really experienced any racist incident. And in fact, yeah, just today I was walking, I was going to buy groceries. There was a Taiwanese, I think he was, yeah, an elderly man. And he stopped me, and he started asking me if I'm an Indian. And I said yes. And then, when someone stops you, even though Taiwan is all safe, I'm like, I don't know what he's going to say. And then he started saying that how he has never visited India and he likes India so much without even visiting it. And he spent 5 minutes talking to me standing on the road. And this is something that has happened to me at least I would say 20 times in 4 years. So, there is specifically after 2020, specifically after this entire idea that, we have a common enemy and we are going through the same problems with China. So there is this shared sympathy towards each other. And I think this is what happened with Indians as well since 2020. So I do feel that we have to call out Western media for spreading misinformation, specifically when the support for Taiwan was at an all-time high. And then the second issue is, then I, of course, looked into it. There were a lot of accounts that were pro-China accounts online. And, the people who later talked about it, they weren't really talking about Indians specifically. They were primarily talking about the labor laws and issues at home. So they weren't really talking about Indians coming here. They were talking about addressing their concerns at home, because Taiwan already has migrant workers from Southeast Asia, and there's also there are policies, discriminatory policies against Southeast Asians migrant worker as well, and government has been looking into it. But in a democracy, there is a due process. It's not an authoritarian state, and coming from India, you and I both know that how much time they take. So definitely, I would say that Chinese accounts have been spreading misinformation regarding this pact. But through your platform, I would really say that and I'm still seeing whenever I tweet something, at least there would be one or two people who would come. I don't know, genuine or not genuine. They would come and say that, Taiwan is a racist country. They might just also be, troll accounts or something. I don't really, and I'm not saying it because I have some bias against Taiwan. I am just saying it from my own experience that there is Taiwan is not a racist country, and I think there was behind this pact and behind the discussion, there was much more than this reductionist view of racism. So I don't really. I feel that with respect to Indians, Taiwan definitely has a very positive view. Taiwanese view Indians favorably. So I do feel that there is some work that needs to be done there to kind of dispel this entire notion of uh, the racism regarding the India-Taiwan Pact. But I do feel that this is something that Indians have. A lot of Indians just reacted to it because I saw some YouTubers and some people talking about it without even realizing that perhaps there could be much more than that. But I do feel that Taiwan really looks up to India. There are a lot of scholars, there are a lot of journalists, and there are a lot of ordinary people who have come and told me that we really admire what India has been doing. And you look at moon landing, you look at how India has been perceived globally with respect to international relations, and specifically what after the G20 summit. There were a lot of people who came and told me that we really admire what India has been doing. So there's a lot of appreciation for a fellow Asian country for its achievement, and I think this is we haven't been talking about it because I think for both there is no Indian correspondent in Taiwan. So for when we talk about media, we do not really know what is happening in Taiwan because I feel that most
Mhm.
of Indian media is also very inward looking. But when it comes to Taiwanese, they're actually looking at Western media for their information on India. It's changing. That there's definitely more interest. There are some Taiwanese channels who are actually trying to directly report on India, but their views are also formed through the Western media, and there are stereotypes regarding Indians. So how do you change that? You change that through direct interaction, through direct exchanges, through media, through social media. We do not know each other. Indians do not know Taiwan, Taiwanese don't know India. So even if we have been looking at each other, it has been through the lens of China. Even after 2020, we have been looking through each other at each other through the lens of the dispute with China. I think that definitely led to Bonhomme and the birth of this the notion of the Milk Tea Alliance and Taiwan, India, part of the same cohort. But I do believe that we need to have more and more exchanges among ourselves, and the people of both the countries really need to talk to each other. Because when we don't talk to each other, what happens is exactly what we experienced after the pact, the internet fiasco.
Yeah, I agree with you. And let me analogize this through another example. First of all, this is my biggest pet peeve about social media and over emotional people on all sides in the world. You get one piece of news. um
Mm.
how many times has this happened? And the government and then independent think tankers or independent
Mm.
handles who know you, they spend their time looking at each hours at each handle that spews rubbish, try to find out where their IP addresses are from. And
Really?
then yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. Why do I keep using cricket is because cricket is the classic example of
Mhm.
that. Every time you'll see this. Let's say I'll give you a famous incident of Indian cricketer Ashdeep Singh. Poor guy,
Mm.
Sikh fellow. And उसको कुछ चौके छक्के पड़ गए होंगे, कुछ तो उसने कुछ एक बार गलती से बेचारे लड़के ने 20-22 साल के बच्चे ने गंदी बॉलिंग कर दी, शुरू हो गए
Uh,
उसको पेलना. And then you
yeah.
know what they'll do, and then somebody will pick up three handles called him this. Like, first of all, ठीक है, बाद में वो 3 हैंडल भी पता चलता है वो पाकिस्तान से थे. वो बात की बात होती है. That is a
वो
separate thing. But at that point of time, like, the first reaction one should have is, okay, let's say there are 10 bad people on the internet. Oh my
Mm.
God, there are bad people who say bad things on planet Earth. That should be the
Exactly.
first rational person's reaction. But no.
look at the percentage. Let's say 5,000 people have messaged, and out of it 10 people said some bad thing. Who cares? Should that be an issue? No. But oh, look, there are racists all over. And it's like, yeah, Indians crying about racism. Oh यार, तुम्हारे देश में तुम फेयर एंड लवली बेचते हो, तुमको शर्म नहीं आती दूसरे को रेसिस्ट बोलते हुए? Let's get a
बिल्कुल
reality check. Let's get a reality check as people.
बिल्कुल नो दिस इज अ वेरी गुड पॉइंट एंड आई ऑलवेज से दैट हम कहते हैं कि उसने हमारे साथ ये गलत एज एन आई ऑफ कोर्स एज इंडियंस हमने we are also facing a lot of racism, but it's not that we are all fine. The fair and
Yeah.
lovely thing that you mentioned. And then we are racist towards our own people. I don't know why. We are same race, but then usko
Are
matlab,
we, don't we do this to our brothers and sisters from the Northeast? What do we do to them? We keep calling them Chinese, for heaven's sake. I mean, we've done this, but are we improving as a society? Yes, because now we love them, we care for them. And look at, in fact, the one of my biggest things that I admire the current government for is their focused outreach towards the Northeast. Like small things change public perceptions. Were
Northeast,
there
yeah.
some random Taiwanese handles who must have said some random bad thing? Could be, who cares? Like,
Yeah,
what are you so obsessed over it for, man? I mean, I don't understand what locus standi do
Hmm.
anybody in any culture have, which you take a random freaking internet sample and you superimpose it on an entire society. I always give that example of the movie प्यार किए जा. वो महमूद और ओम प्रकाश का सीन है. वो बोलते हैं कैमरा कुत्ते के ऊपर, कुत्ते की आंखों से आंसू गिर रहे हैं, कैमरा आसमान पर, आसमान से बारिश आ रही है, यानी कि दुनिया भर के कुत्ते रो रहे हैं. This is literally the way most analysis is done today.
बिल्कुल so this is why I said कि हमें we have to pick and choose. We cannot really
Ah,
believe everything. And about the India thing, I would actually tell the Indian audience because after that incident, and then of course I also got a little emotional after that because when I read it, even if it's a minority view, I felt bad for a while because it's not something that you want to hear. But then of course when I became more pragmatic, practical, I realized I understood the situation. But it became such an issue on Indian Twitter. Foreign minister actually came out in support of Indian, and he actually said how important India is and how welcoming Taiwan has been for Indians, and how they want to welcome more Indians. And to personally me as well, I met him in a Diwali event. He actually told me that he has been saying this. This is his favorite line. Whenever he goes to an Indian event, he says, "I love India." So he actually personally told me that how he really wants to see advancement in India-Taiwan relationship, and this is just from the Chinese, account that have been there to promote disinformation on India-Taiwan relationship. And we also have to accept that it is not in the interest of the Chinese leadership if India-Taiwan become closer.
exactly.
So this is something that we also have to keep in mind. And whatever we are seeing on the internet, thoda sa to we have to be careful of what we are consuming and what we are
Exactly.
believing. So वो हम
Exactly.
इंडियन को ना थोड़ा सा मुझे लगता है सब में नहीं हम भी we are the largest population, so all types of people are there, but हम बहुत जल्दी इमोशनल हो जाते हैं इंटरनेट पे चीज देखकर कुछ. So I do feel that we need to be pragmatic, when we are moving towards the path of becoming a wish guru. So we have to be more pragmatic, I would say.
Yeah, and I get it if pelo the Taiwanese on your YouTube videos saying tum kaun hota hai mujhe bolne wala, it might get you clicks, but how do you contribute to your country? You have to be a responsible person. At the end of the day, every time I sit down on this chair and I host this podcast, the first thing that comes to my mind is how do I benefit not just my country, let's say in this case Taiwan. It's not just about me, it's about the Taiwanese people and me.
Yeah,
Most people are decent. Yeah, I'm a very hawkish person when it comes to Pakistan, and that's never going to change. That's
that's
just the
exactly
reality of life, and that's understandable.
of
Yeah,
like since
yeah,
independence.
Yeah, but other than that, I mean, we need to be more responsible in our utterances, which is why, which is why I reached out to you. I was like, यार और किससे बात करें, कम से कम फिर सना को ही बोलेंगे आके, मतलब लोगों के दिमाग में थोड़ा बिठाओ कि यार भाई शांत हो जाओ.
I'm glad that you brought this up, because as in, this is something that we really need to talk about. And the thing that you said about, a few YouTube bloggers said the exact same words कि ये कौन है, क्या है. I feel that you also have to see कि progress इतने साल में हुआ क्या है इस रिश्ते में, and how it is going to benefit your own country. And it's just not going to benefit Taiwan. If India and Taiwan are moving closer, India is also benefiting from this. And this is one of the reasons why India is moving towards Taiwan, that this is mutually beneficial. And I think from India's perspective, is it's more like, it's beneficial to my own interest, it's beneficial for my people. I'm looking to expand in all directions, and towards my east there is Taiwan. I do not have diplomatic relationship with Taiwan, but I could really get something from Taiwan, and perhaps to reciprocate, I could also give something back. So my point is that India is benefiting from engaging with Taiwan. It's not that कि हम ही इनको बस सब कुछ दे रहे हैं, ऐसा नहीं हो रहा है ना. So I feel this is something that we don't realize. The point that you rightly mentioned, that it should be contributing to something, and it should be significant. And then you need to make significant contributions when even you're doing a podcast, when I'm talking to the country, to, I would say, the mankind. But it's important that we become responsible when we talk and when we have a platform.
And at the end of the day, no country is going to be uttering 100% things. Maybe the Taiwanese state apparatus does not say everything that is in sync with the Indian state. But let me tell you, for example, India and Israel, right, have good relations. But India's stand has been always been very nuanced, till the extent that even today we voted for ceasefire. Just today we voted for ceasefire. So now what? The Israelis are going to be a naraz Fufaji in the shadi, and he's going to, like, Israelis like, ja tere ghar pe khana nahi khata. No, they're going to deal with us. Similarly, they're not going to vote for everything that suits us. We're still going to deal with them. That's just how the world of geopolitics and real politics is. We have to be practical, that states have interests. And if we don't have a mature stand on any of this, we're going to suffer. But one last question, then I'll take a couple of audience questions, and before we wrap it up. Now, how does one India actually deal with China then in this entire? Because look, at the end of the day, all these problems, like I said, in the weird marriage situation where we are having an affair, and the one we are married to has huge problems, and the one we're married to has a huge shotgun on our head, whether we like it or not. How does India deal with China then in this scenario, the Chinese interference, as far as India and Taiwan is concerned?
I think India is dealing with China very well. India's policy towards China has been very consistent and nuanced. So there are two parts of it. One is how is India dealing with China when it comes to its own problems. So I would say that it's India has been very clear about it, that is not business as usual until we go back to the pre-Galwan status quo, which China, of course, is not accepting, is actually displaying utter disregard for India's concern, and actually projecting that nothing has actually ever happened, that our soldiers never died. And their soldiers, of course, didn't die. This is what, because they didn't even come up with the number of Chinese soldiers who died. So I think what India has been doing, and then of course we can always say that India could be a little more open about taking China's image. I'm seeing it now, like we talked about how Rajnath Singh said that China is a threat to us. So this is changing. And then I would say that India took some time, but as we talked about it before, that every country is operating on the basis of their own interest. So India has to test the water, but with China, I definitely feel that look at US, look at other countries, Australia, as in, even if they are trying to manage relationship, they're also trying to reach out to China. And look at how Europe is divided on China. So everyone is trying to get reap the benefit of the so-called economic rise of China that they have been doing, and they still think that it's beneficial. Of course, you cannot really decouple or de-risk, whatever you want to name it, from China entirely. But I do see that there's a lot of confused policy from all these countries' side. So I do feel that in this regard, India's policy has been very, very consistent. That the high-level dialogue is going on. but at the same, not high level dialogue, and then Modi and Xi are not really meeting, but at least the channel of communications are open. When I said high level dialogue, I meant foreign minister level dialogue, defense minister level, and the military to military talks are still going on, because the idea is to keep the channel of communication open and to keep talking about it. But at the same time, we are seeing that Modi hasn't met Xi since uh, Mamallapuram in 2019. Of course, COVID happened, but there were opportunities. And I would say that one of the reasons why Xi Jinping didn't really come to India for the G20 summit was primarily because because Modi didn't really agree for a bilateral meet with him. So then there were other factors as well, but I would say that could have been one of the major factors behind that. So as I also mentioned that, India is not really focusing on China's red lines anymore. Now, how Taiwan is configured in this entire situation. So when all these India's policy towards China started changing, what India started doing is to look at Taiwan, and not because it was looking to use Taiwan as a card against China. India has never done that. We always had Tibet card, but we really don't like to play any card against Tibet, because we want to have our policy as independent and we want to focus on issues. So I think India has had a very principled stand toward China, I would say. So I think the difference is that India has stopped viewing Taiwan from the Chinese lens. The idea that they would say something if we reach out to Taiwan has, I would say, is going. Because if you look at MEA statement as well, and 2 years back, I think in 2020 or 2020, I think it was in 2020, when the Chinese embassy came up with this letter for the Indian media that you have to refrain from calling Taiwan a country when you're reporting. So the MEA spokesperson, Arindam Bakshi, he actually said that our media is free and they would do whatever they uh, feel all right. So I think that was a huge change. But that was just one of the first changes. After that, last year when the US House Speaker visited Taiwan and the MEA issued statement, of course, they didn't name China, but one of the major changes in the tone was that, we are against unilateral change in the status quo. And we know when this language is used is primarily against China. And very recently, we saw Minister Jay Shankar in the UK in a think tank event actually saying that we have made advancement in areas of cooperation with Taiwan. So, and he also didn't mention the unofficial nature of the relationship. So, he's also deviating away from the usual talking points on Taiwan that, we are advancing relationship that are in the areas of cooperation that are within the mandate of the relationship. So, the mandate of the relationships, the unofficial nature of the relationship was not there. And foreign ministers saying such a thing, I would say that it's just not a subtle policy change, it's a huge policy change towards Taiwan.
All right, now let me take a couple of questions. I think somebody knows you're from JNU. Somebody has asked, how does one get into Taiwan studies in JNU?
There's no Taiwan studies in JNU yet, and I hope one day we get to have a center that is actually Taiwan studies and not Chinese studies. But there is a Chinese Studies Center in School of International Relations, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and I am from that center. I did my PhD in Chinese studies from there. So, but now I think JNU and the Chinese Studies Center is very open on uh, letting students work on China. There's more expertise on Taiwan in India now, I would say. And I would say that there is credible effort to strengthen Taiwan studies in JNU and in other parts of universities. But definitely, I think one way to go about it is to take admission in Chinese studies. And I've definitely, I'm not saying it because I'm from JNU and I'm from SIS, but in India, SIS is the premier institute for international relations, not just for Chinese studies, but there are a number of schools. But I feel there are other private universities as well. They're also focusing on Taiwan. So if someone wants to get into Taiwan studies, there are a number of private universities. I would say there is Jindal, then there is I've forgotten also, but there are a number of universities that are now focusing on Taiwan as a separate subject altogether.
Okay, so next is a thoda lamba prashna hai. Legally, Taiwan is ROC. So, what is the stance of the people and leaders towards the McMahon line? Do they accept that to be the border between India and ROC? Or do they claim it like PRC? Any official statement has been made in this regard? How do they handle this basic sensitive issue between India and China?
So, as in the most of the claims that PRC makes today, they inherited from the ROC constitution, and then ROC constitution, there's something that is still there. As in, this is on papers, definitely ROC still claims territory, not just Indian territory, South China Sea, East China Sea, and of course the mainland China. So, but there is no effort, there is no talk about reviving those claims, and specifically under the DPP government. And this is one of the reasons why I say that uh, DPP government is good for foreign policy, because specifically for India, then I've spoken to several officials and other people. They have a very clear stance that this is something that we do not really want to pursue claims. But of course, it's I think this is something, and Indians also on social media, of course, I've seen this is one of the common comments that I keep receiving. But what about these claims? I think we have to get away from this idea, because it's very difficult for them to change the constitution. Taiwan is a democracy, and I feel that being Indians, we understand that how the difficult it is when politicians have to go for elections, contest elections every 4 or 5 years. So I would say that any change, and it's just not about elections, it's just not about winning. If there is a change in the constitution, that would consider to be an act of war by China, that you are changing the constitution, you are declaring independence. It's not about that they're changing policies towards India or Japan or any other country. They're also changing the very nature, the very identity of the ROC. So there's one of the reasons why they couldn't even change the name of the country, the flag, the name of the airlines. So what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lot of confusion, as we talked about initially when we were starting the discussion, that there is no awareness about Taiwan. And of course, the name doesn't help. So when the COVID-19 started, there was a lot of discrimination against the Chinese people as well. And when Taiwanese were outside abroad, there was a lot of discrimination against them as well, because a lot of people actually thought that they're Chinese. So there was a lot of frustration among Taiwanese people. So what they did was, so they increased the font of Taiwan on the passport, and they started using Taiwan more. But it's all unofficial. They cannot really change it officially, because as in, no one wants to fight a war with China. And Taiwan has a very clear stance, DPP has a very clear stance, that we want status quo. We are not looking for a war. So, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people who are listening, watching your show, would agree that that would actually, if there is any change in the constitution with respect to the claims on Indian territory, China would be considering it as an act of war. And this is something that they definitely want to avoid.
I agree. At the end of the day, I feel, like I said, in the world of real politics, you pick your battles. Just like, I mean, if I always say this, if an Israeli of forget the Indian example,
Mhm.
everybody knows that whether it's Saudi Arabia right now, whether it's many Gulf states right now, like it or not, I mean, there are mainstream portals that are talking about it. They will do the proverbial Hindi word "kadi ninda" of Israel, and behind the scenes, they keep on playing footsie with Israel. They
Mhm.
keep on playing footsie. They keep on telling Israel, "Ha ha, aur karo." I mean, it's a fact. I have read articles written in mainstream Western publications where, or even in the Arab world, where they say, "Oh yeah, the Saudis and the Emiratis and these guys are just going around telling Israel, yeah, yeah, we're going to condemn you publicly. You're going to do this." There are multiple reasons for that. Whatever those reasons are, I'm not defending those things. Nor am I defending what Taiwan did. Nor am I defending many things India does. All I'm saying is that it is just the way the cookie crumbles in these issues. The world of geopolitics works on certain,
Bill.
assumptions. Like my view on foreign policy is very cynical. I have always maintained that foreign policy, and pardon, and I apologize if somebody, including you, feels offended. Foreign policy is transactionalism. There is no such thing as a global liberal values based order. Everybody, every single country has affairs with different people on a daily moment to moment basis, and then they pretend to have this thing like the Americans. I mean, the Americans are the past masters at that. They pretend to have this so-called morality, while I mean the Americans have the gall to tell us something while they were actually planning. And this is again not me, this is Tucker Carlson and many other mainstream. If you think Tucker Carlson is a kook, go and read left-wing portals in America saying that Mike Pompeo wanted to bump Julian Assange off in the Ecuadorian embassy, for goodness sake. I mean, what Americans go around talking about morality? So my whole point is that we should not be sensitive as a nation about these issues. I think from an Indian perspective, what do we need from Taiwan? And what does the Taiwanese need from us? I think that should be our only focus. And how do we manage the Chinese and all of this? At the end of the day, if the Taiwanese benefit and we benefit, I mean, I would say in the proverbial Punjabi way, ki farak penda hai, boli jao, kind of a thing. But before we wrap it up, I'm going to give you the last word, Sana. So take it away.
I think we have discussed a lot about India, Taiwan, China, but I think I would like to end by thanking you. I really had so much fun talking to you, and I think it's nice that you're using a platform to talk about a topic that's everyone talks about, China, Taiwan, but not a lot of people have an idea about what exactly is happening. So I feel that's very important, and the job that you are doing, disseminate informed opinion about issues. I think this is something that's very important. So thank you so much.
No, it's my pleasure. And as far as I'm concerned, this is why I started this podcast, right? The whole aim of starting this podcast, I always tell people, अगर मुझे पैसे बनाने होते थे तो मेरी तो फैक्ट्री थी, मैं ये नहीं करता था. That was a far better career option for me than this. But I did this is because I felt there was a gap. I'm a big believer in India-Taiwan relations, India-America relations, even India-Canada relations. I know we're going through a very bad patch right now, India and Canada, but I'm a true believer in these things. I don't think India and China should also am I hawkish on China? Yes, I am. Not as hawkish on maybe the Pakistan issue, but yeah, at the end of the day, Indians will look at its own interest. The Taiwanese will everybody looks at their own interest. But at least this podcast, through my podcast, what I try to do is like my job has always been like, my passion was reading books, reading good authors like you or somebody else, and trying to bring the best through that. I mean, I could have made a YouTube video bashing racist Taiwanese or dikha dunga tumko, and gotten 1 million+ views, but I don't want to do that. How does that benefit India? It doesn't benefit India one bit. At the end of the day, we have to do things that are responsible. So once again, Sana, thank you very much for coming, and keep writing those amazing essays. I know you write on the print and many other places too, so keep doing your good work.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun.
All right, guys, we'll wrap it up. In the description of the podcast, you'll see Sana's profile and Sana's handle on Twitter or whatever, X, jo bhi bolna hai bolo. You can go follow her, read her articles wherever she writes them. She's an amazing writer. You should follow the India-Taiwan beat. It is a very important geopolitical relationship. And as far as I'm concerned, you know how the drill is. If you can, please, become a member of the Cārvāka podcast by joining the membership program, whether on YouTube or Fanmo or on Patreon. If you can buy the merch, go to kushalmehra.com. If you can't do anything, just leave a rating if you're an audio listener, or subscribe, leave a comment on YouTube. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, namaste. Take care. Bye-bye.